Justin, there's a problem with Facebook, so we're just on the air and the stream right now. Coming to you soon. You're live.
Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm Justin Harris, in for J. Julio Vela, who's out tonight. Joining us is Judge David Singer from Harris County Criminal Court at Law number 14 on the campaign trail. How you doing, Judge Singer?
I'm doing great, Justin. How are you doing tonight?
Doing well, thanks.
Little
Thanks for
tired,
coming on.
but I'm here.
Yep, I hear you. It's been a long week.
Been a long year.
Thanks for coming on. Right. I do want to mention that we did invite your primary opponent, Mr. Jarrell Rogers, to come on tonight, and he was not able to do so. But thank you for joining us and talking to our viewers about your campaign and your reelection. So if you wouldn't mind, take as much time as you'd like to introduce yourself to the viewers and tell everybody a little bit about what you're running for in your campaign.
All right. Well, my name is David Singer. I'm the incumbent Democratic judge in Harris County Criminal Court at Law number 14. I was elected in 2018 along with 15 other Democrats that replaced Republicans, and we brought a lot of change to the House, I think. I'm disappointed myself that my opponent did not find the time to come on and address the Criminal Lawyers Association and the criminal lawyers in Harris County. I would think he would relish the opportunity of telling folks why he thinks he should replace me as the judge in that court. And the only thing I can assume that he doesn't want to come on here is he doesn't have good answers to those questions. He never talks about my record. He never met me. I think I might have met him briefly before he signed up to run against me. He doesn't really know me or know anything about practice law in my court. If he would have taken the time to look at my record, he would have found out that my court has one of the highest clearance rates of any of the county criminal courts. It's got the second lowest docket. I've tried more cases than all but one county court judge, more than the other county court judges. I've taken no vacation days in my time in office. We get 18 days that we can take for visiting judges. I've taken 0. Actually, I took 1 sick day, but I've taken no vacation days. And it's because I'm serious about my job. I work hard. But that seems to escape my opponent.
All right. Well, you talked about case numbers and clearance rates, docket numbers. That's one thing that we talked about a lot on the show in the past. Why is that a metric that you think that's used by so many people to judge a judge or a courtroom?
Well, I don't think it's the only thing. I mean, to be fair,
sure. And you didn't say that. To be fair,
it's way more.
That's just one thing that kind of stuck out
about
to me.
Numbers. Yeah, I mean, I went there. I think it's a measure of how hard I've worked at my job.
Fair.
If you're trying to run against someone, unseat an incumbent judge, I think you should have a reason to say that that judge is doing a bad job, and especially when that person is within your own political party.
Right.
When I ran for judge the first time, I selected to run against a judge that I had some issues with the way he was running his court, and I stated them publicly, and I campaigned on him. And I think if you ask that judge today, he would say that I was right about some of those issues. So I didn't just take lightly that I was running against an incumbent, and it was from the other party. But there were judges from the other party that I wouldn't have run against. But in this situation, it seems like this election cycle, we have members of our party that feel like they can just run against a judge for no reason whatsoever. And that's what I kind of have an issue with.
Do you think that do you have any idea of why that is? It does seem like an interesting thing that there's a lot of the Democratic judges right now, the incumbents, a lot of them are more concerned about holding onto their bench based on primary challenges rather than general challenges. Do you have any idea why there's so much challenge going on within the party?
Well, I think there's a combination of opportunism with an attack from certain aspects of the district attorney's office. In fact, the district attorney herself.
Who's also a member of the Democratic Party.
Well, she says she is.
All right. That's one thing that I've noticed, and I have been doing this. I've been licensed for 10 years and working in Harris County courts for a little bit longer than that when I was, you count time when I was clerking for other attorneys. I don't recall a time when there was so many district attorneys.
It hasn't ever happened.
What has it?
It hasn't ever happened before. I mean, I've been a practicing lawyer in Harris County. I walked into the old criminal courthouse at 301 Fannin and 301 San Jacinto. I'm sorry, it's been that long. That's almost 40 years ago. And I was a member of the district attorney's staff for 6 years under Johnny Holmes. Johnny Holmes had a policy that you could not run for office while you were sitting district attorney. If you wanted to run, you had to resign. And it happened numerous times over the years or several times anyway, that folks resigned to run for office. But at that time, you had no choice. And as a sitting district attorney, I think that's a good policy to have, because I don't think you want your assistants running around the courthouse with divided loyalties, perhaps accused of impropriety. I mean, what's going to happen the first time a victim of a crime that's not happy with the result of their case finds out that the prosecutor took a check from the defense lawyer in his campaign? I mean, that is something that could happen. And I think it will happen at some point in time, and it's going to be a problem. The other thing is, do you really want the judges in the courthouse to be looking at all the assistant district attorneys coming into their courtroom as potential political challengers and political foes? I mean, I don't think that's healthy for the system as well. When you allow assistant DAs to run while they're working, they have nothing to lose by doing so. They keep their job if they lose. If they win, great. And they're being encouraged to do so. And I really don't think it's what you want, what you should want as a leader of the district attorney's office.
Well, those are all really interesting points that I hadn't thought about. And I spent some time this afternoon preparing for tonight's episode, thinking about some of this. And where I was kind of thinking was, one day the person is working for someone who is a party opponent in every single case in the court. And then the next day they are the judge who is supposed to judge their former employer from as recent as 24 hours prior, as a neutral arbiter in a litigation.
Well, it'd be a couple months. It would be a couple months. Election day to taking office.
Sure, but have they made it clear whether when they're going to stop having, stop being on payroll for the district attorney? Would it be after election day, or would it be the day before New Year's Eve?
Apparently anything goes in that situation. And I think that's a good point. I mean, I hadn't even really thought about what happens if they become the judge-elect and they're still a DA. I mean, I hadn't even thought about those issues, but I just don't think it's a good look for the district attorney's office. And I don't think it's something that we want our district attorney to wield political power to try to control who's judging her cases in the courthouse. I mean, there's a separation of powers issue that arises, that we have, one party trying to pressure the supposed neutral arbiter with politically.
That which puts the judges, I would think, in a difficult position, because we talked about this before we went on the air, but I was going to ask you to kind of explain the difficult position that you're in of being able to, or having to run a political campaign, but you're limited on things you can discuss, right?
Well, right. I can't talk about any specific cases or things that have happened in my court, other than generally speaking. So yes, I'm handicapped from the standpoint that I can't speak about cases. I can talk about what I've done. That's why I talk about docket numbers some, because that's objective evidence of that's public information.
Right.
But yeah, we're somewhat handicapped, and that's just kind of the part of being political, electing judges. Anytime you're going to elect judges, we're going to have to be political to some extent.
But
So
you
that,
have, well, where I'm kind of going with this, and maybe this isn't the right thing to be talking about on a show that's about to be about your campaign. It's more of a political soapbox. But if you'll indulge me for a minute, Judge, it seems like you have the district attorney who is allowed to make commentary on particular cases and controversies that are pending in the courts that her assistant district attorneys practice in. She's allowed to make political commentary on that to the news and the media and privately to other people as well. And then, but you can't even defend yourselves in the media. The judges can't to those political attacks. And then when she has her own employees running campaigns against those judges, it puts like a double layer of pressure on you that I personally think that is not a professional thing for an office to do. And I don't think it's the right way to handle our system.
well, I definitely think Johnny Holmes's policy was a better policy. But all I can do as a judge that's being challenged is go out there and talk to as many people I can and try to inform them about what the true facts is. Yeah, she's got a powerful microphone that she can get up in front of the media anytime she wants and say anything she wants. But you know, that comes with the territory. When you're a judge, you really can't worry about stuff like that. You've just got to go on and do your job and put your head down and go to work every day and you know, make the best decisions you can when you're in a position to make them and not worry about stuff like that.
Well, let's shift gears here then. What kind of stuff as a judge do you worry about?
I worry about doing the thing every day, about treating everybody fairly and with dignity and respect, and making sure that their case comes out the way it should come out. That's what I worry about. I'm worried about the job. I'm not worried about all the other stuff. That stuff is, you know, stuff I have, but it's just not part of the job.
How do you watch? Do you follow local news? Do you watch local news? Do you read the
Sure.
local paper?
Sure.
And you read the criticism of the judges that are coming from the local media and police officers union and the district attorney's office?
Absolutely.
How do you not let that worry you? How do you shrug that off and just keep doing the job every day?
Well, I mean, because you've got to. That's what the job is. If you can't do that, then you can't do the job. I mean, if I'm going to worry about, you know, political fallout when I'm getting up on the bench, that's not going to be good for anybody. So I just put all that stuff aside, and I decided a long time ago when I got elected, I'm going to go down there every day and do the job that I think the way it should be done and make the decisions that I think are right without regard to the consequences politically. And that's the only way I can do it. And if it costs me my job, so be it. You know, I just want to take the opportunity that I've been given to serve the people and to do this job and do it the best I can. And I'm not going to worry about the political consequences or what people want to say. Of course, I'm going to fight back when I can, you know, on the campaign trail, but that's all I can do. The job is separate, and the job is going to be done the way I think it should be done.
So, and that's kind of where I'm kind of going with this is I did a jury selection this week for the first time since COVID started. And we asked jurors who expressed that maybe they had a prior personal experience with certain type of case that brings us there, if they can truly put that aside, put their prior experiences aside and just judge this case on its own, sort of in a vacuum, right? And I don't know. I think a lot of folks are sort of skeptical whether a human being is capable of doing that, even when we like to think that we can. So I always wonder if a judge wakes up in the morning and sees their name in the newspaper, or even another judge's name in the newspaper for something, if when they take the bench, if that is in the back of their mind and affects their considerations or their judicial deliberations that day. And if there's something that you have to do to make sure that you don't do that. Because I will say, I do practice in your court, and I have since before you were the judge on court 14 in cases that carried over from Judge Fields' docket to your docket. And I was in your court as recent as when? Last week before,
Like
on a case. And I haven't seen any difference in anything from your temperament to your judicial sentencing, your rulings from day one till last week. I think I tried one of your first cases.
One of the first,
a long time ago.
yeah, it was a while ago, but it was one of the first 4 or 5 cases in my court for sure. Or
So
was that, did we try,
haven't
we
seen
tried
a
it at the
change.
CJC? We were in the CJC, I think
It
we
was in the
tried your
CJC,
case.
right after they got
Right
back
after we
in
got
there
back
after
in there,
Harvey
yeah.
renovations. And then we left again. But I don't know. I don't know how you do that. And it's, do you have to, is it just who you are, or is there something you have to check yourself before you put on the black robe and walk on the bench?
I think a little bit, because I think when I do see stuff like that, I think about it, and then I tell myself, I can't even consider that. That's
Right.
not something that's part of this decision. Let's make the decision based on this case and try to put that out of my mind. But I consciously do that sometimes because I do catch myself thinking that way, because it's human nature to do that. So,
Okay.
but, I spent 35 years as a lawyer. I've been on both sides of the docket. Getting elected to this spot was an honor and a privilege, and something I want to leave the legal profession is. So I take that seriously, and I just decided early on, I'm going to do what I think is right. And if it makes somebody mad, well, then it's going to make somebody mad, but I'm going to do it the way I think it should be done, based on my experience, drawing off the years that I've had in that courtroom on both sides of the docket, and as a lawyer, and now as a judge. And that's just the way I'm going to do it. And if it costs me my election, so be it. And I don't think it really factors in that way, but I'm going to make those tough decisions because I think it's the right thing to do, and that's the only way I can do the job.
Okay. So we kind of just hit on this a little bit, and you were talking about decisions you got to make, and you making decisions to do the right thing. And we mentioned Harvey and going back into the CJC, and then COVID. I kind of alluded to that. What are some decisions that you've been able to make over the time to allow your court to keep running during an unprecedented pandemic, after an unprecedented natural disaster? What are some, because some of the stuff has just been thrust upon you, right? Where you can do jury selection, where you can't do jury selection, how many people you can have in your courtroom, and all that. Other things you may have had some discretion on. So what have you had some discretion on? What have you been able to do to keep things running?
Well, yeah, I mean, we didn't even have courtrooms when we got elected, and some of these people running against us are challenging judges for the few jury trials that they've had since they've been elected. We didn't even have courtrooms. We got elected. Right. Congratulations, you're a judge. Judge Rodriguez and you are going to share this courtroom. And by the way, you can't even try cases in that courtroom.
you have it for 2.5 hours in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's where it started. I mean, so the district court judges, they were in the civil building sharing courtrooms with the civil judges and couldn't try cases over there. So that's how we started. And, what they did is they had trial courtrooms in the Family Law Center. There was 5 of them for the 16 of us to split trials on. So we each got one trial week a month to be able to have jury trials in our courts. And except I quickly found out that, and I knew this already, that county courts aren't in trial every day. If you go any day up at the CJC, even in normal times, going back 5 or 10 years ago, out of the 16 county courts, you might find 3 or 4 of them in trial, right? So what I started doing is I just started setting cases every week, even though it wasn't my trial week. And then I'll worry about getting the courtroom if I get the case ready for trial. And I was able to get courtrooms when the parties were ready for trial and everything else fell out. So that was one of the things I was able to do under those circumstances to try to keep my trial docket moving. Because I know from experience, and I think you know this too, Justin, that the most important thing as far as moving a docket, any docket, whether it's a felony court docket or a misdemeanor docket, is a judge that's willing to go to trial. And the lawyers know the judges that are willing to go to trial, and they're going to hold their feet to the fire, and they will take care of their business on those cases. Same thing with the prosecutors. If they know the judge is going to hold their feet to the fire, they will dismiss them if they have to dismiss them. when it gets to that point. So that's one of the most important things. And it's got to be regular. It's got to be consistent. And you've got to get people trials when they want them within a reasonable amount of time, like 90 days and not, a year or two. So those are the things that being so important, that's the way I was able to handle that trial docket early on to get as much courtroom space as I possibly could and keep my docket moving. Then we got back.
Before you, sorry to interrupt you, before you go on to more things that you've done, did you get any pushback when you start doing this kind of stuff? And this is kind of a selfish question we don't really get a lot of insight into how this stuff works on the administrative side, but if you start doing things that's different than like the memo that's gone out to all of the judges, do you get pushback? Like the bat phone ring in the office that you share with Judge Rodriguez, and like he's like, "Oh, hang on, David did that. Here you go, Judge Singer." There are
a lot of stakeholders that I wasn't aware of.
We always want to know, or at least I want to know, like, who are the people that get all mad about like how much you're paying for certain things in your court, and like what your numbers are. Who is it that like is pulling those strings or pushing those buttons?
Well, nobody has ever said anything about anybody that I've paid, any money that I've paid out as far as vouchers. I've never had any complaints or issues with that. But there, you have court administration, you have other, you have the commissioner's court, you have other stakeholders, the clerk's office, probation department, pretrial services, all these other agencies. Anytime you do something, there's a ripple effect, and you learn quickly if you're doing something that is causing ripples that people don't like. When it came to the trial courtroom situation, though, that was kind of amongst us judges. And I think I found, colleagues, nobody cares about other judges working as long as it doesn't interfere with their territory. So I was just kind of, would set cases and be a backup. And then it would work out that I would get the panel or the courtroom to use. If it was some judges weak, they would obviously have priority and I would yield to them. So you got to get along with people, obviously, and not trample on their territories, because, judges are kind of like little fiefdoms. Everybody has their own little space that they control, and you don't want to interfere with another judge's ability to work his docket or her docket.
Makes sense. What kind of has there been anything from, I'm sort of jumping around here, but has there been anything from what we've done to get by during COVID that you think has been valuable and you'd like to see kind of stick around on a more permanent basis?
Well, I think Zoom is here to stay. And I think it's in all aspects of life. I mean, here we are tonight on Zoom, on a show. So, I mean, I think that's here to stay. I think it can be useful for certain things. The issue is some people abuse it. If you don't make people appear in court, sometimes they don't even show up on Zoom. But I think Zoom for, routine resets, where we're waiving appearances on these cases, the lawyer's just coming in for a reset or to chat with the prosecutor for a second, all that can be done on Zoom. And I think it helps the lawyers. So I think that's here to stay, and I intend to keep using it that way. I've never been one to have defendants appear on Zoom. I don't see the point in that. I also think it presents some ethical issues when you have somebody on Zoom and their lawyer may or may not be at the room in the same time. So I just don't do it that way, but I use it for lawyers to, communicate with the prosecutor or the court to reschedule cases when there's no reason for them to come in for just a 2-minute conversation.
Do you have any concerns about the county and the people who, because you can't just set up Zoom on your own, right? And you don't have like an IT person that works just for you. Everybody works for the county. Do you have any concern about the county pulling the plug on anything or restricting access that limits your ability to use Zoom or any other of the things that you've kind of worked out?
No, if anything, the county will want us to use more technology than I'll want. I've already turned down an iPad and all kinds of technology that they've tried to give me that I don't want to use. So it's not going to be me objecting to them shutting stuff down. It's going to be me trying to figure out how to use the stuff they want me to use.
Objecting and open up more stuff.
I mean, if it was me, I'd go back to green files and orange files. Okay.
Okay, I hear you. But keep Zoom open. is what you're saying.
So yeah, Zoom I think still can be valuable. Yes.
Right. How's it been working with all the construction going on in the building?
Yeah, that's the second challenge we have. All that hadn't started yet, even though Harvey happened in 2017. When we took office in 2019, nothing had been done. So
Right.
we basically had to come up with the plan to how we were going to renovate the CJC, if we were going to renovate the CJC in the first place, and then what was it going to look like going forward. So it's been a challenge, and I can see the light at the end of the tunnel on that. Though we've made a lot of progress, and we're hoping by the end of this year it'll be mostly finished. But we have not experienced a single normal day of criminal justice since I took office. But we have to deal with it. It is what it is.
Right. They're doing some major renovations. They're adding at least is it 6 or 3 new elevators?
No, there's going to be 2. There's going to be 2 elevators on the outside of the building. One on the front right corner, or the front, it would be the southeast side, and then one on the northwest side. That's going to be a single elevator, and I think the thought for those is one of those is going to be for employees and one of those is going to be for lawyers. I'm hoping that's what the plan is. And the idea is to keep as many people out of the lobby as possible, which had challenges before. It's certainly a lot better now that it's bigger than it was when they designed the building originally, which was ridiculous. But if we can keep some traffic out of that lobby, we can keep the flow going on those elevator banks better. So that's the idea. And of course, eventually maybe having the district attorney is out of the building now, so that's relieved a lot of the flow too.
Well, they're moving back in, but it does make me a little nervous to know that there's like one elevator that's always just for defense lawyers. I don't know. I'd like to know that there's like other people in there who they'll miss more if something failed in the elevator shaft. But anyway, bad joke. JV does the jokes and he's not here tonight. So, Judge, what are some of the things that you still want to do? Well, actually, before I do that, I want to say, what kind of experience do you have with any of the specialty courts that have been kind of either in the works and already set up or still in the works to be put into place?
Well, there's one, I'm not sure if we can call it, it's kind of a specialty court that we're working on right now. It's called the Community Care Court. And that's going to be something where we actually take the courthouse out into the community with all the stakeholders, the DA's office, defense lawyers, judges, probation department, and work on things like driver's license fixes and criminal record expungements and non-disclosures. That's what's working on now. As far as the other specialty courts, I haven't been a specialty court judge. My opponent criticizes me for this. There are 6 specialty courts. There are 16 county criminal courts. Not everybody can be a specialty court judge. And the selection process was basically when we got elected, we took volunteers, and everybody wanted to be a specialty court judge. And I was kind of not known to the group. So I just let the judges that wanted to be specialty court judges pick their courts. Like we have a Spanish speaking sober court. Well, obviously I wasn't going to do that. Judge Rodriguez wanted to do that. So it made sense to let him do that. We had I think there's a female sober court. So we had one of the lady judges do that court. We have a veterans court. We have veterans that were members of our team that took one of those courts. So that's kind of the way that worked. I think it's pretty funny when he criticizes me for that, because it's not an indication of lack of hard work when you look at the total picture in my court. Right.
The specialty or the community court, what was it called?
Community Care Court.
When is that looking at potentially coming on track?
I think we're probably by the end of the year. I mean, there's a lot of pieces that go into that, funding and bringing aboard all the stakeholders and what their role is going to be. That's going on. There was a pilot that was run, and trying to remember where it was. I want to say it was like Maryland or someplace like that. So that's kind of what we're modeling after. But we're hoping to get it up by the end of the year, I believe.
Will it be sort of like a mobile thing?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. What are some other things that you still hope to accomplish, that included, or other things that with a reelection?
All right. Well, I mean, first, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about bail reform, and I know everybody thinks it's done and over with, but it's really not. You know, when I was a young prosecutor in 1984, I was assigned to Jimmy Duncan's court, and that's before your time, but I would be surprised if you hadn't heard of Jimmy Duncan. And have you?
Mhm.
Yeah. So
there's pictures on, I forget which wall is on. There's pictures on one of the courtrooms.
it was
walls.
court 3.
Right.
It was court 3. And he, you know, we used to go into the holdover every day as prosecutors and talk to a dozen inmates and work out 8 or 10 pleas every single day, just directly with the defendant, no lawyer, because they want to talk to us. They wanted to take their time served and go home. And that was a problem that made a big impression with me, because I saw how that basically made the presumption of innocence evaporate. And when I became a defense lawyer, it was one of the things I fought every day, especially doing court appointee work, trying to convince clients not to plead guilty when they were being offered time served, because I knew their case would fall apart if they could hang in there. The problem is they didn't have a small amount of money to make bail. So their choice was plead guilty and go home, or fight my case and stay in jail. And of course, you know what decision they would make 90% of the time, or even more than that. So that was a tremendous evil that I think this group of judges deserves a whole bunch of credit for fixing. And we fixed it immediately. Before even we passed the new Rule 9, I implemented it on day 1, granting pretrial bonds. If the only reason if you're in jail is because of money, you shouldn't be there. And if you're not a danger to the community, if you're not a flight risk, you shouldn't be in jail just because you don't have a couple $100 and this next guy does. So that's a big thing, and we're being attacked for that by a lot of forces, law enforcement, the bonding companies, and I think the district attorney has chimed in on that side too.
Oh yeah, big time.
I mean, she literally came out in the media and said misdemeanor bail reform is causing a spike of crime in our community, and it's total horse pucky.
She was in support of bail reform. She was for it before she was against it.
Justin, we had meetings with the district attorney before we took office, talking about what it was going to be when we did this bail reform. And she was all for it until the day came to sign the consent decree. And she walked over to federal court and she made a public statement against it. So I don't know what happened there, but anybody that thinks that misdemeanor bail reform is causing crime in this country or in this community is not looking at any evidence. There's simply no evidence. There's been small spikes in crime all throughout the country. And last time I checked, Harris County was the only county that did misdemeanor bail reform. So the conflation of the issue is just unbelievable. There's been studies done by the federal court that it's not causing any increases in crime, not causing people not to show up in court more. It's just being held up because there's certain people that don't like it, that are losing money because of it, and they're going to oppose it and attack judges because of it. But I'm still proud of it. And I'm always going to be proud of it. But that's the big, still fighting it. They're still coming after us. We still need to defend it, is one of the reasons why we need our incumbent judges back, so we can keep defending it, because we've got committed people, right, that want to fight off any attack on bail reform. You know, one of the other things that I did on my own is issuing summonses in a large number of cases. You know, county court judges, we get about anywhere from 3 or 4 to 8 or 10 2B warrants for every day presented to us on cases. And the tradition had been you review for probable cause and that person at some point in time when they have a confrontation with a police officer or traffic, or they go to renew their driver's license or wherever. There's a lot of times where that's just not necessary. And we found that out, especially during the pandemic, when we couldn't put people in jail to the numbers that we usually do, that we stopped arresting people and just issuing a summons. And guess what? Those people came to court too. So
Right.
when I see a case like, I don't want to give specifics, but when I see a case where there's no urgency for an arrest, for an example, an illegal dumping case where the guy has already admitted on videotape that he's guilty and he's sorry. Why do I need to issue a capias for that guy? Why can't I just send him a letter? Because when I do, they're showing up 70 and 80% of the time. So that's what I do. And I do that in every case where I think that can happen. You could have a shoplifting where they release somebody at the scene. You can have a DWI where they went to the hospital and you're filing the case 2 months later after you get the blood test back. There are numerous cases where we don't need to put warrants into the system to get somebody to go to court. So that's something that I started early on. I'm going to continue to do it and expand it as much as possible because it's working.
Sure. And that also, we've seen a lot of issues lately with warrant execution by law enforcement becoming deadly for both law enforcement officers and civilians.
And that's exactly
cutting down
what's
on
in
the
my
number
mind.
of times you have to do that. That's
Right. Every time there's a confrontation between law enforcement and a citizen, something could go wrong. Now it shouldn't, but something could go wrong. So every
Right.
one of those encounters that you can limit, you perhaps save the life.
Yeah, that just seems smart and like common sense. I've had plenty of clients, tell me that if get frustrated. I don't find out if a client gets a warrant issued for their arrest. No one calls me and tells me, and the clients also don't get notified. They might start getting a lot of letters in the mail or phone calls from bonding companies who want their money, but that's the quickest way to know if you've got a warrant out. But nobody calls and tells you. Many of my clients in that situation said if they would have just told me, I would have just come to court. In fact, I had one this week. We found out she had a warrant out for a few months, and she showed up because I was able to tell her that this is just a theft case that they just took 6 months to file. It's not even shoplifting, but it's a theft. And under the local rule, you are entitled for a free bond. You just have to come to court and sign it. So that's somebody who might not have shown up in the past if they had fear of arrest under previous regimes and judges. She showed up specifically knowing she had a warrant to get that cleared up. So it seems to make sense. And I do see a lot of the demonizing of the judges and the blaming of the judges in the media for the things that are happening, both from people who are out on bail, who pick up new charges, and then the granting of PR bonds like you're talking about. And there has been no numbers, no statistics, no proof, no evidence, anything to support the showing that it's caused, this bail reform that Harris County's pursued and done successful at. It seems like, when you look at the jail numbers to see the success, to show any kind of increase in rate of crime. So
no, in fact, the study showed the opposite, actually.
Right.
There was a study done by the federal court monitor. There's a monitor that was appointed by Judge Rosenthal to watch how we implement this bail reform. And they keep statistics on everything we're doing and all the forms we're filling out and all the appearance rates and all that stuff. And the recidivism and the increase in refiling cases and things like that. And they showed that it's had a positive impact, not a negative impact. And also, I'm one of the courts that if your client picks up a new case and I see that person has a lawyer on the old case, I'll call you.
Right.
I'll have my coordinator contact you and tell you, hey, your guy's got a new warrant, bring him in.
I have actually gotten that email from your coordinator. Speaking of, how does that go?
I was a defense lawyer. I know that is appreciated.
It's frustrating. It is. How much do you rely on the staff and the people who work in your court?
A lot. I mean, a good is crucial, not only from the institutional knowledge that they had when I came in, but just in sometimes a disconnect between what you see a judge do and then how it actually gets done in terms of what paper has to be filed, who has to be notified, how has to be sent, those kinds of things. And if I didn't have staff that knew what they were doing, I'd be lost some of the times on to how to implement whatever order I was trying to implement. So it's critical. You know, a good coordinator is critical. I'm blessed with a great coordinator. I was tipped off to her right after I got elected, and it was a great decision to bring in an experienced coordinator to help me manage the docket.
Yeah, I've known Laura Conti for longer than I've known you as a judge, and she runs a tight ship. I always like to say that, and I don't mean any disrespect to you or any other judges, but the most powerful person in the courtroom is not the judge, it's the coordinator.
I understand.
Frankly, because, you know, if there's a day when I know I don't want Judge Singer to see this issue or to hear this issue, you know, if I'm good with the coordinator, she can tell me when Judge Singer might finally take a vacation day and might not be there.
The problem is Judge Singer doesn't take vacation days.
I know. Yeah. So you just have to.
But you may be able to find out when I'm sick or campaigning, you know.
Right. I can't. He doesn't. Otherwise, I need her to tell me when Judge Ross is going to be there. But yeah, you know, it's interesting to see changes in political climates, and then the court staff kind of stays ubiquitous and moves around, and because there is that common knowledge there. But yeah, I think you've made a good choice with that one, Judge. So what other things that have been hot button issues in the last year you wanted to talk about or have come up on the campaign trail that maybe have surprised you?
What has surprised me about the campaign trail?
Well, from things that we didn't think would be issues, you know, a year ago. You know, there's articles that I was reading in legal news about lawyers getting disciplined or even disbarred for prepping witnesses through the chat function in Zoom, which 4 years ago didn't exist in my world and any of the legal world. You know, now here we are, like full pendulum swing. People are losing their license for doing that kind of stuff. So these are just sort of some issues that I never even thought of that we would have that have come up. And maybe I say on the campaign trail isn't the right context to give that question, but more just that you've seen over the last year that we didn't think we'd see before.
Well, I mean, I think trials on Zoom are problematic.
Right.
I think juries on Zoom can never happen.
Right.
Juries need to be in the courtroom. I think you can use Zoom occasionally for witnesses, but there are things, like you said, there's ways to gain an advantage because of the platform. And I think you have to be mindful, or a disadvantage for the platform, and you're mindful for that stuff. So I'm not one that's ever going to be a big proponent for using Zoom for trials, you know, unless if it's a, you know, a limited kind of thing. That really hasn't come up on the campaign. I mean, the campaign has been kind of interesting because basically I'm telling my story and Jarrell is talking past me about how he's in the community and I'm not, and I don't even understand the argument he's making about that. It's, you know, it kind of rings. There's a code to it when he says it, and I resent it because I've been in this community for 41 years. I've not only been a lawyer, I've been president of my homeowners association. I've been a baseball coach and manager for, you know, about a decade. I mean, I've done plenty of things in the community, and I've also represented a lot of people in this community. I've represented over 4,000 defendants. I did 15 years of indigent defense every day. So I've been in all communities in Harris County and represented all folks, in this community. And I think I have an understanding of the community because of that. You know, there's nothing that'll make you understand what someone charged with a crime goes through than to spend some time with their family while they're going through it. And I think you understand that. You recognize things from a totally different perspective. You know, the financial hardship, the employment hardship, the collateral consequences on children and other family members. I mean, all of those things, you get an appreciation when you represent somebody charged with a criminal offense.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm not saying, I just don't think you can have a balanced perspective as a judge unless you've spent some time doing that. Now, I'm not saying nobody can do it, but I just think it helps a whole lot to have been both a prosecutor and a defense lawyer. And I think it brings you into the community as a defense lawyer. So I really don't understand my opponent's attacks on me for that. Like I said, he doesn't know me, so I guess he has to say something. But I've certainly have been in this community for a long time. I care about the community. My family's in this community. I want to keep this community safe. And I think I have a unique perspective, a unique opportunity to do that in the position that I'm right now.
That makes sense. What are some, I know you can't talk about specific cases and controversies that are in front of you. So I don't know if you can, to what extent you can answer this, but there's some cases that have come in front of you that have kind of stuck with you where you felt like you've been able to kind of do bigger than just the one.
I can't really tell you about cases that have stuck with me. What I can tell you, generally speaking, is, and I think it's one of the things maybe that the district attorney doesn't like, is I tend to review probable cause in every case, even if it's been reviewed by the magistrate. And that's because I want to not only determine whether there's been probable cause, but also if the bond conditions are appropriate, because I'm finding many times bond conditions imposed when there's no necessity. For example, you have a DWI, the guy it's 100% alcohol, he blows over the limit, there's alcohol in the car, smell of alcohol, and no indication whatsoever of any drugs, yet the magistrate's orders drug testing. And, I can't tell you the number of times I've just removed drug testing from a case because it's being added, just because it's kind of like a tradition, that,
Right.
Well, we've always done it, we can do it, so that's what we do. We drug test people because that's what we need to do when they're on bond or when they're on pretrial bond. And I don't want to run down the rabbit hole of just because we're granting more pretrial bonds that we're putting more conditions on bonds. Bond is to make sure people come to court to protect the community, and that's it. And there are most cases you don't have to put any conditions. And in fact, there's been studies on drug testing that shows that 90% of the positive UAs on drug tests are for marijuana. Well, in most
Right.
cases, that's not telling me anything I need to know or care
Right.
about knowing. So why are we drug testing all those people when 90% of the time all we're going to find out is that they smoke pot? Now, there are times you have to drug test people. You have people that are in critical situations on serious drugs, cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, all kinds of bad drugs repeatedly and can't stay off them. And then you have to monitor some folks to protect themselves and society. But those are exceptions, not the rule. I think we need to get to that when we talk about imposing bond conditions and think about it the way the law is. The law says you have to impose the least restrictive bond conditions to get the person to come to court and to protect the community. And that's what we should do, the least restrictive, not just put conditions on everybody to maybe catch somebody that's going to do something bad while they're on bond.
Why isn't anybody saying that? Why is the news media? I mean, you hear it here on Reasonable Doubt every week.
If you were in my courtroom, Justin, you'd hear me see it about 3 times a week. You'd hear me say it.
I give you that. We're all saying it, but why is the news media running on all the fear mongering and the stuff that the district attorney's office is putting out there and the police officers union? Why is anybody saying, look, here's what the law says?
It sells papers. It gets attention. When you scare people, you get attention. That's a political tactic that has been used by every political leader since the beginning of politics. You scare the people, right?
I guess I'm just really naive
because
to think that we could expect more.
It's like when we talk about crime rates. Yeah, crime is not good right now. Crime is never good. But when I walked into the courthouse 1981 in Harris County, we had 771 murders. Last year we had 500 and something. And we have 1 million more people than we had in 1981. So you tell me, is there really out of control crime? Or was it worse in the 80s and 90s? It was worse in the 80s and 90s. We've had a decade or more of historic low crime rates. And you can look across the country. We've had a short-term increase spike since the pandemic. We had a drop during the pandemic year, and now we've had an increase since. But you know what else we've had in this community? We've had a lot of guns in this community, more than we've had back in, 40 years ago. So
Sure.
nobody's talking about that because it's not popular to talk about in Texas, gun restrictions. But we have so many guns in our community that I think that's as likely to be a cause of more shootings than anything that's happened at the courthouse.
That's probably true. It takes a gun, not a judge, to shoot somebody. Judge Singer, so let's talk a little bit about you. Why, let's kind of go big picture. What you've talked about your career of 41 years. What got you into criminal? What is it about this area of law?
I wanted to be in the courtroom and I wanted to be able to work for myself. So I wanted to learn how to try cases, and I wanted to have a practice where I could be the boss, because I'm not so, maybe I do better by myself as a lawyer. So that was basically what got me there. And then I just found it interesting. You got the job at the DA's office, and then that was going to be my career. There was no doubt about it. But I was interested in criminal law even in law school, and just just like that aspect of fighting the government.
Did you know when you went to law school? Did you know that you wanted to be in the courtroom?
When I was in law school, yes. Mm-hmm. First day of mock trial class, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
That was it for you. I did as well. When I went to law school, I knew I wanted to be in court and in trial as much as I possibly could. And I'll never forget the first day of federal criminal procedure. The professor asked in a class of like 110 people, raise your hand if you went to law school because you want to be in courtroom trying cases. And I was like, oh yeah, like everybody, right? And so I threw my hand up and I look around, like me and two other people, and I'm like, well, what the heck else? What do y'all want to do with your law? Like, and I thought
Make
this
money.
was all there was. But yeah, but they're all making money and just reviewing contracts and filing
lawsuits. By now, Justin.
Well, that's true too. Yes, I did reach a milestone in my age this year, but I'm still down in the trenches, and I find it very interesting and was drawn for a similar reason as you. But you've gone on a career trajectory. How long were you in defense?
So I spent 6 years at the DA's office and then 28 years in private practice as a defense lawyer.
Wow. Okay. So you've seen and done most of it then.
I'd like to think so, though I still see new things once in a while.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I think that's a big advantage of my job, that pretty much everything that comes up, I've seen before.
Right. Experience is important. That's true. What are some things that you'd like to see the legislature change in the penal code or the code of criminal procedure? I'll kind of geek out for a second. That you have to deal with.
Other than marijuana?
Legalize marijuana. That'd be one.
That would be one. I think that would help the criminal justice system if we took drugs out of the criminal justice system. I've always been one to think this is a medical issue. We shouldn't be putting addicts in jail, and we should need to find a way to deal with drugs and education on drugs without it being a criminal justice problem. I think it corrupts the criminal justice system. Making law enforcement into narcotics officers is corrupting. Sure. And we don't need. I mean, I think there's better ways to deal with addiction than locking people up. So that's one thing. But I mean, that's a long-term thing. I'd like, and this is probably going to bother some of the defense bar. I think there needs to be some ability, not in the misdemeanor courts, but in the felony courts, to hold people at no bond in certain cases, beyond maybe what the Constitution says. I think what we have now is we have judges trying to rule on cases and set bail in felony cases, and they don't really have the ability to do what's right because they have to set a bond. So what they wind up doing is they just try to jack the bond up as high as they possibly can to the person not make it. And that's really not what the way that the system was intended to function either. So I think there needs to be some reform, but not the reform that we saw in the legislature, like reducing judges' discretion on setting pretrial bonds, but how about maybe a little bit more discretion in the district courts? And if I was a defense lawyer, Justin, I could see your look. That's the way I'd be feeling too, because there's nothing I enjoyed more as a defense lawyer than to go in and tell a judge, you have to set a bond for me. And I understand that because I was in that position many times, but I think there maybe needs to be a few more cases where bond can be denied, and then setting realistic bonds in all the other cases. So I think we need to do something along those lines if we want to get to where we need to be.
I understand. So we still got a few minutes left. There's some stuff I want to hold off for towards the end, but is there anything else, that's you want to get out there before we get into some of the wrap up things towards the end of the show?
Well, you asked me an open-ended question when I don't have an answer, an open-ended question, but you would think I would.
I can make it more direct.
Go ahead. Ask me another question.
So what are some things that you think that some of the good changes that have happened that you think you would be worried about changing if the district attorney's office has their way? And we sort of alluded to this at the beginning and beat around this bush pretty directly, that the district attorney's got a lot of her employees who are running against the judges right now, a lot of them running as Democrats within their own party. Do you really worry that could change things in a significant way if the district attorney's office gets their way and replaces the judges?
Yes, I do think it's bad for justice generally. I think it's bad for the atmosphere in the courthouse. I think it's bad for the district attorney's office being able to put together an effective staff. The district attorney's office will not be a perch to run against the incumbent judges that are there. The district attorney's office needs to focus on her job in prosecuting and keeping people safe, and doing the job efficiently and effectively, and keeping people there with experience so they can do that job. And I think this undermines it.
Well, in the last half minute, why don't you tell us why people should vote for you again and you should be reelected to the Democratic nominee for Harris County Criminal Court of Law number 14?
Well, because I'm the most qualified, I'm the most experienced, and I've earned reelection by my performance on. And I think that the third thing is the biggest thing. When you get elected to this job, if you do it right, you should be reelected. If you don't, you shouldn't. I think I've done the job right. I've worked hard at it, and I want to continue to do it. And I appreciate letting me on this show and being able to talk about it. And I wish my opponent would have come on to discuss all these things.
I hear you. I appreciate you coming on and talking to us about it all and answering our questions and putting up with my meanderingness under the influence of Mucinex. But thank you very much, Judge Singer. Harris County Criminal Law number 14, on behalf of Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association and Reasonable Doubt. Thank you very much to Mark Pirtle, and we'll see y'all next week.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank you, Judge.
Justin, we're clear.
Awesome.
And I don't know what's wrong with it. We were on the air fine. We were on the stream fine. But and I had this Facebook computer all ready to go, and something knocked it off the air, and I just couldn't get it up again. So sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay.
I will get